Welcome to another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast, where we delve into the depths of parenting in ways that you might never have thought of before. So sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Hello. Baruch Hashem, I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, it's a pleasure. So tell me a little bit about what you do. I know you work from the academic end. I think you're part of a school. You also advise maybe from the outside. Tell me and my listeners a little bit about what you do.
I am the Director of Curriculum and Student Progress at Lubavitch Yeshiva Ocean Parkway, or Temchet Tamimim Ocean Parkway. It's one of the elementary schools in Crown Heights from pre-1A to 8th grade. I started working there about 6 years ago now, originally as a curriculum, sort of like the researcher or developer, trying to figure out how to create a solid curriculum for the school going from one grade to the next, knowing exactly what's going to happen in each grade, giving the teachers materials that fit with that, and making sure there are no kids falling through the cracks. So originally my work was very curriculum oriented. It was worksheets and workbooks and tests. And now it developed to a point where the school basically has set custom made curriculum in Chumash, Mishnayos, Gemara. This year we're working on Halacha. And we have a lot of data about how the kids are doing. And so my job is more to watch all of the data, see how all the kids are doing, and then set up interventions. So schedule meetings with the principal, with the teachers, with tutors that might be helping the kids or service providers that might be helping the kids, and really just oversee the whole school in terms of the kids' academic success.
Wow, that's such important work. I operate more from the behavioral, and I do work in schools as well, aside from the parenting, and I see more from the behavioral and where the academics and the behavioral really go hand in hand. When a boy, not all the time, but very often, you'll have a boy who doesn't feel great about himself because he's not doing well academically, and then that can end up leading to behavioral problems, which is only going to send him into a downward spiral. So this is super, super important. Obviously from the academic end itself, but not only from that end, for the boy in general, for his whole well-being, for his self-esteem, et cetera, et cetera. So let me ask you like this. As a parent, you send your child to school and you think, you can even look on LinkedIn and you'll see like when school starts, you'll see all these different posts about how the parents are excited, their kids are going to school, now they're going to be taken care of. I'm sure you see that in other places as well. So sort of I might think like I'm sending my child to school and he's good. That's one part of the day that I really don't have to worry about. I'm going to obviously do as much as I can for him all the time, but at least I have a big part of the day that the school is taking care of him. I'm not going to worry about that part of the day unless the school calls me, but as long as they don't call me, we think we're good. So my question to you is there something that I as a parent can do to actually help my child with his academics in the classroom? If I'm not a teacher and I don't know this area at all, what are some of the things that I can be looking out for that I should be able to tell if my child is experiencing any difficulty with academics in school?
Okay, well, first of all, let me just comment on that mindset. As much as I don't want to diminish the babysitting element of school and the fact that the kids are taken care of for so many hours, and that gives us hardworking parents, a little bit of a break. School is not only about relieving us of the work. This is really the structure that we use for fulfilling the mitzvah of Vishinantam Levanecha, right? So we parents, every father has a mitzvah to teach his son Torah, to be mechanech his son in mitzvahs. Choosing yeshiva and sending the kid to yeshiva is really the fulfillment of that mitzvah. So fundamentally, it's still our mitzvah. It's still our responsibility to make sure that our child is doing well, regardless of whether the school calls. That would be the ideal from a parent perspective, right? As if the school is so organized every time that kid is not doing well, and as a school, that's what I would encourage the school to strive for. But as a parent, if we want our kids to thrive, it would be wise not to let go of that sense of responsibility for the kids doing well. So the question...
So what are some of the things they can look out for as parents to be able to spot a potential academic issue before the school calls? Let's start with the younger grade. Let's say pre-1A, first grade, second grade, those grades.
The good thing about academics, I guess, as compared to behavioral, is it's more objective and more tangible in the sense that it's just a little easier to know if a kid is doing well. Meaning, if the school is organized and there are tests, you can be on top of making sure you know how your kids are doing on the tests, right? Whether the tests are good tests or bad tests or fair or not, that depends on the development of the school's curriculum. But still, as a parent, regardless, you can keep track of how your kids are doing on tests. Perhaps even more fundamental than that is that we, as parents, should really know what the goals are in each grade. Each grade is supposed to take kids from a certain place to a certain place. In pre-1A, it's very pronounced that you're taking the kid. This is how it is in Lubavitch yeshivas. I'm not sure if it's different in other communities. I'm assuming not. That in pre-1A, you're taking a kid from basically knowing the Aleph base to being able to actually read words, to read from a siddur, to read from Tehillim, right? And maybe he knows all the rules, maybe not. But basically speaking, he should be able to read words correctly and fluently. So that's what you would be watching in pre-1A. In first grade, he should be able to learn Psukim and Chumash. And he should know words from Chumash. And he should be able to answer questions, maybe circling the words in the Chumash that are answering a given question. So I think as parents at the beginning of each year, or in the middle of the year if you haven't done it already, it would be smart to have a conversation with the Rebbes to understand what are the goals of that year. What are the content goals, right? So which parshas are they learning? And what are the skills goals, prefixes, suffixes, shirashim, milim? What is it that the kid is supposed to know? And you shouldn't just be able to ask any Rebbe, if my son is doing well in your class, how would I know? What would be the things that would indicate to me that he's doing well?
That's great. So what you're saying is that in any grade, I said the younger grades, but it would really be in any grade, we would be able to ask the Rebbe, what can I expect from my child in this year? And you're saying, what can I expect him to know? And what kind of skills can I expect him to learn? And then I should be able to see at home a first grader, to use your example, to do Chumash with him for a few minutes, should be able to give me an idea, to give me a clue if he's more or less on the right page or not. I'm assuming the same thing would be with the secular subjects, right? We'd be able to ask the teacher, what are the goals for this year? In first grade, they usually learn how to write, In third grade, they usually learn how to write script. And I'd be able to assess on my own if my child is more or less hitting the milestones. Let me ask you a little deeper into this, though, because let's say a regular parent that is sending their oldest child to school, for example. So they have no frame of reference. They don't know, what the other children did in that grade. And then they ask the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says, let's say something like, well, you answered, you should be able to know basic words in Chumash, and you should be able to answer basic questions by circling the Chumash word. And the parent doesn't really know what's considered basic on a first grade level. Is there a way that they can get more of an idea? Should they be asking the Rebbe for his worksheet? Is there a way that they can get more of an idea to be able to assess if their child is academically up to par or not?
Of course, the more questions that they ask the Rebbe, the better. You could ask questions like, how many milim or shirashim are they expected to learn this year? How many psukim are they expected to learn? Which, if you know which parshas it's going to be, then you know how many psukim. Which prefixes and suffixes are being emphasized? Can you see the worksheets that are being used? I think the key is not to give up on the question. That would be my advice to a first-time parent. Don't give up on the fact that you should have an answer to this question.
And don't also feel embarrassed, like, I'm sorry that I'm asking, or I'm making the Rebbe a little bit crazy. You want the success of your child, you're going to have to put in that effort, even if it's a little uncomfortable, I'm assuming. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think if the communication is respectful, which is always an important part of working with schools, and it's being done in a sort of a tenua of, we want to take responsibility to make sure our kid is being successful. So it's not coming with an expectation on the Rebbe, it's coming as a motivated partner with the Rebbe. You're actually helping the Rebbe then in that case.
So
right?
let me interrupt you for a second, because this was one of the things I wanted to ask you. I've seen in my work, working with children behaviorally, that there happens sometimes, more frequently than I would like, that when parents are dealing with a child that is acting up more behaviorally in school, and the school is very busy with the child and they're constant contact with the parents, you have sometimes that communication is excellent and everybody's on the same page and they're all working together to help the child, and it's great. Then there are sometimes that the communication becomes really intense and they end up not on the same page, and they end up being a very strained relationship, and the school feels like the parents are down the back, the parents feel like that the school is not listening to them. It becomes a very contentious relationship. And that's not productive, obviously, for anybody. So my question is, do you have any tips for parents before they pick up that phone? They should be able to prepare themselves for the conversation with the Rebbe in a way that it's going to be the most productive relationship ever. Now, we're gearing this talk towards the parents. Obviously, there might be some rebbeim or teachers that are listening, but the point over here is that you'll have all different types. You'll have all different types of parents. You'll have all different types of rebbeim and teachers. Some of them are better communicators. Some of them are not as good at communication. Some of them a little bit more sensitive. They tend to view things in a way that maybe something's going against them a little more quickly than other people. Do you have any tips that can help us overall with any type of parent, any type of Rebbe or teacher to create a solid working relationship based on good communication?
For sure. I'll borrow a muscle from my life coaching, which is the other branch of my work that I do. And, if it were a marriage, right, and let's say the husband really wants the marriage to be successful and the wife is really not speaking nicely, let's just say, right, and she's really not doing what she is supposed to be doing, or the other way around, it doesn't matter, but I'm just going to speak from the man's perspective, right? So what would I encourage the man to do is, you want to take responsibility for creating what you want. Right? And what you want is for this marriage to thrive. And that may require you to develop your patience. Right? And that may require you to put things aside that initially are hurtful. We're always encouraged to learn from Yosef Atzadik, right? That Yosef Atzadik, even though his brothers did wrong to him, right? He was b'simcha and he said, you know what? Hashem created this scenario and this is part of my avodah to figure this out.
Right.
And that is something that it says in Tanya that we're supposed to learn to apply in all of our relationships. So I think it goes for a marriage, and I think it certainly goes for a relationship between the parent and a Rebbe, which is, I think we underestimate how fundamentally important of a relationship that is from a Torah perspective. Parent and a Rebbe, a partnership that is designed by Hashgacha Pratis, that these two teammates are supposed to be giving this child his Yiddishkeit. And so we need to look at it as a fundamentally important relationship where it's super important that this relationship works out no matter what. Even if, let's say the other side, in this case, we're speaking from the parent's perspective. So let's say that the Rebbe and the school, they're just completely negligent, which they're probably not. But even if they were, it doesn't serve the parents well to get all upset and be frustrated and to come with this expectation that I'm supposed to be able to send my kid to school and never have to worry about anything. Going back to what we were saying at the beginning, we have to adjust our mindset and realize that it could be true that schools and Rebbes are imperfect. It could also be true that I, as a parent, am imperfect. And you know what? Everybody's imperfect, but we want to form a partnership to make the child successful. And that brings me to my next tip, which is to remember that at the end of the day, what everybody wants most is for the kid to succeed. Nobody doesn't want the kid to succeed. I promise you. There's no teacher that doesn't want the kid to succeed. There's no principal that doesn't want the kid to succeed. There's nobody does not want the kid to succeed. And if we focus on that, then, that will happen. If we can just channel everything about the relationship towards how do we make the kids succeed and put aside our egos and put aside what we think the other person should have done, even if they be'emes should have done it, even if they truly were negligent or they did something wrong or whatever. But it's not going to serve the kid and the parents and everybody involved if we're going to get upset. Does that make sense? So we need to focus on what can bring us together and not what there is to nitpick and pull us apart. Honestly, I really get it why it happens, but it's really important to work on our midas and develop that partnership and just be determined and know that for the sake of my child, this partnership must be a healthy partnership.
Amazing.
And if you really can't, then maybe it's not a good place for the kid to be. But I think that there's plenty of work to do in our midas and our respectful communication in the way we look at the school and the teacher and everything before we get to that point.
100%. Basically, you're saying that before you start the phone call, you first put into focus that I want this to succeed, and therefore I'm going to do whatever I can to help this relationship succeed. And then the second thing is to not get hung up on what I think is right or wrong from the other party's end, but rather what will serve the best interests of my child. And those are both phenomenal points in general, like you're saying, for every relationship. I will point out that this is an easier relationship than your example of a marriage, because by the end of the year, at least in the Rebbe's case, you're on to the next one. Hopefully the next one will be better if you didn't like this one so much. But that's a great point, that you can build a good, positive relationship with almost anyone using these tips, not focusing on what you want from them, what you feel they should do, but rather focusing on what is actually the most productive thing for them. I'll add a couple of my own over here, because this is something that I'm very into also with communication, and it builds off of what you're saying. When you're talking to someone, let's say the parent wants the Rebbe to do a certain thing. So very often, what will help is if you tell the Rebbe your idea and then ask him, does that make sense? Do you think that's workable? Is it a doable thing? And now what you're doing is you're not pushing your idea on him, but rather, like you said, you're working together with him to come up with something. So you said your idea, but you're doing it in a collaborative way rather than you pushing it on him. You will likely get much, much better results than you would otherwise. Let me ask you the next thing, though. So I did everything. I looked out for the problems.
Can I actually add one more point to what you're just saying?
Sure.
I think that's a perfect example of what I mean when I say respectful communication. I didn't really flesh it out, what I mean by communicating respectfully. I'm a very big proponent of this idea of mutually respectful relationships, which basically in a nutshell I would say means I'm important and what I think is important, and you're important and what you think is important. So if I see something about my kid, that's important to bring onto the table. And if you see something about my kid, that's important to bring to the table. And I'm going to take both seriously. I'm going to take what I see seriously, and I'm going to take what you see seriously. Right. And not just think that what I see is right and what you see is wrong. And the other thing I wanted to just add in quickly, everybody's nervous, right? At the beginning of a new school year, it's new Rebbe, new parents, nobody knows, is he going to be nice? Is he not going to be nice? I think every time that there's a smooth, peaceful, pleasant, respectful conversation between the parent and the Rebbe, each one of them learns that the other one is a safe space for them to go to. And that means that there can be another conversation, and the relationship can develop and grow and improve, but if we come in with this big expectation and the first conversation is a disaster, well, guess what? No one's going to want to pick up the phone again. And 4 months are going to go by, and then that's half the school year that something could have been done. And so we have to just have good, positive, respectful conversations, be able to disagree without getting upset, and keep the relationship strong. And then we can always revisit it at a future time. We could try something for 2 weeks and then plan to check in 2 weeks later. If the relationship is strong and respectful, there's a lot that can be done. And if the relationship is not strong and not respectful, then there's a lot that can be destroyed needlessly. This year, I've been saying to parents in Lubavitch Yeshiva Ocean Parkway, where I work, that I really think in terms of curriculum development, the yeshiva is at a point where the only thing that really would stop kids from doing well in the yeshiva is a breakdown of the teacher-parent relationship. Because if that relationship is strong and you just need to know what to do, we're organized enough that I can let you know what to do. So it's really important to maintain the positive relationship no matter what.
That's amazing. So now let me ask you like this. Let's say I did everything. I looked out for the problems. I spoke to the Rebbe respectfully. We had the good conversations. I understood the goals of the year. I'm looking out for it, and I see, that my child is a little bit behind and he's not up to par with academics with where he should be. Okay, so, I'm a good parent and I want to help my child, but really, what can I do? I mean, I'm at the school. I don't have experience in teaching. Obviously, there's something that's making it harder for him to pick it up than the other children. I have no experience if I'm not in special ed in remedying that. So what can I, as a parent, do to actually help my child?
So there's a few things. First of all, you want to try to pinpoint as much as possible what the exact issue is. So some kids are strong in language and they're weaker in comprehension. Some kids are stronger in comprehension, they're weaker in language.
What do you mean by language?
Knowing Lashon HaKodesh, translations, and understanding how the words are built.
Language has a lot of meanings.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm talking now about Limudei Kodesh, so I'm talking about Lashon HaKodesh, being able to know what the words mean and translate them, sometimes even reading them. A lot of kids, this is something I wanted to make sure that I got a chance to say on this podcast. A lot of kids that are not doing well, they're not doing well starts all the way at the beginning. When in pre-1A, they have 1 year to learn how to read, and the weaker kids don't get it in 1 year, and it's not given the same type of attention afterwards, and from then on, they're in a tough spot. I think statistically, I don't have data from all across Klal Yisrael. If people want to help me get it, that'd be great. But I think there's many more kids that their challenges start right at the beginning in pre-1A and first grade than, kids that are thriving through, let's say, Kita Gimel, Kita Dalet, and then they start having problems afterward all of a sudden. You know what I mean? So Kriya is very often a challenge. And so you could say, well, what do you mean he doesn't read perfectly? Okay, it's fine. No, it's not fine for a kid in, Kita Gimel, Kita Dalet to not be able to just read a few psukim at a time perfectly or very close to perfectly, I mean, if a kid is learning 4 psukim of Chumash a day, he should be able to read them flawlessly if he's in, let's say, Kita Gimel. So sometimes it's just reading, and if just reading the words is so hard, then for sure translating them is going to be 10 times harder than it has to be. And breaking down the prefixes and suffixes and shirashim is going to be 10 times harder than it has to be.
Right?
So you want to try to pinpoint where is the issue. Is it that he can't read the words? Or can he read the words, but his vocabulary's translation is very low? Or does he not understand the way the words are built? Or maybe he understands Chumash because Chumash is stories, but Mishnayos or Gemara is a totally different type of thinking because it's like laws and opinions about the laws and questions about the laws. And it's also content which is less familiar. Remember, kids are usually learning the Parsha from when they're in preschool. And then they come along to Mishnayos. You don't really have exposure to Mishnayos. Personally, I'm hoping that someone will make some Mishnayos tapes that kids could start listening to in Kita Beis or something to give them a little earlier exposure to that type of thinking. I was going to give the example also, going back to language and comprehension. One of the things that we have in our Mishnayos curriculum is that there's a lot of questions where we say, this is the question, answer the question both in the words of the Mishnah. So you have to write those 5 words of the Mishnah that answer that question and answer it in your own words. So same question, you're answering both ways, in the words of the Mishnah and in your own words. And we have them do that a lot.
Teaching in the language and the comprehension.
Yeah.
Got it.
So you can't just know that the Mishnah said that the sukkah has to be 20 ames. You have to be able to write the words of the Mishnah that say that.
Right.
But you also can't just circle those words of the Mishnah and not know which word means which thing.
Put the word together with the actual meaning of the word.
Some kids are better in one and some kids are better than in the other one. Some kids can find the words, but to explain exactly what they just circled or what they just wrote, they can't really explain it in their own words.
Right.
And other kids can explain
it. I as the parent, I realize there's a problem. I'm looking to pinpoint what the problem is. I'm seeing if the problem is in the understanding and the vocabulary and the, knowing what the words mean, etc. Now, let's say, and I'm assuming that I do that by, like you're saying, asking him to, let's say, read the words, and then I can see if it's a Kriya issue. I could ask him to tell me which words answers this question, a simple question that he knows, and I can see if it's that issue. So now I pinpointed the issue. I have it. what can I do to help my child now?
So then it basically becomes a question of who's going to work with the child on it and what system are they going to use. So usually it's not going to be able to be the Rebbe. There's a limit to what the Rebbe can do for the kids who are behind the rest of the class. What you do want to ask the Rebbe to do is, can he make sort of an agreement or contract with the kid that he's responsible for a reduced amount? So maybe if they're having a test on the whole parak of Mishnayos, maybe he's responsible to know the questions that are on the first half of the parak, or even smaller. It could be 2 Mishnayos. It could be 1 Mishnah. But there's always an amount that is reasonable to ask of a kid. The amount should not be 0. So that's one thing you can ask the Rebbe to do, is to have modified tests. And I've seen this work. We have a teacher in Ocean Parkway who's a pro at this, and he builds kids up from, he did it especially in English class. I always get a kick out of it. There's a list of 20 spelling words. There's a kid that he held responsible first for 1 word. You have to know how to spell this 1 word, You don't have to be able to have your handwriting for a very small amount of the ABCs or like whatever it is. And it sounds funny, but the truth is when you give that kid that opportunity and then you build him up slowly in terms of what he's responsible for, so then you're asking him something reasonable, and the kids really do develop from that. So that's one thing that the Rebbe can be asked about, is modified testing. Then the rest is basically some form of tutoring. So either you do extra homework, you spend time learning with the kid yourself, or you hire a tutor, or different states and stuff are probably different. In New York, there's a lot of resources for special education for kids to get services, which, not necessarily can they do Limonei Kodesh, but still they could help the kid in other ways that help them along. If you know what the problem is, and you have someone that's available to work with the kid, and you have a resource like a workbook or something that is targeting that challenge at that kid's level, which there's so much stuff out there. I know everybody doesn't spend all their time looking out for like what are all the different curriculums and stuff out there, but there really is so much out there that if usually I find that the challenge is getting someone who has time available to work with the kid. It's usually not about resources. I mean, I guess I'm also speaking for Ocean Parkway, where we developed a lot of our own resources, so that really helps because we can just give that same workbook or, all different things that we have access to. But there's so much. There's so many different types of flashcards and Lashon HaKodesh workbooks. If that would be someone's challenge, I would say go to my website, send me an email, and I'll try to find the right resource for you, because I've just maybe you can make some kind of a master list of resources, like if it's Kriya, then you have these, and there's even things that were developed with special ed in mind, like there's Kriya books that were made in Orton Gillingham ways for kids who are dyslexic. Like a lot of times I think more and more people are trying to create materials they're doing the heavy lifting for you in terms of special ed type of methods and stuff like that. So I think that if you know the issue, you've identified what is the core challenge, or at least what's the first challenge to work on, hopefully you're doing this early on, right? The earlier you're doing this, the less behind the kid is going to be. So if we're starting to intervene in 6th grade or 7th grade, we're very, very, behind. So it's much harder to design that intervention, because a lot of times you're asking the kid to go back to something that theoretically he was supposed to have learned 6 years ago, right? Nobody really likes doing that, So that's much trickier. So the earlier, the better, really. But if you know what the issue is, and you have someone that is willing to dedicate time to the kid, and you find the right resource, you should be okay.
Okay, amazing. Let me ask you like this. Let's say I do the work, so you said if I find a problem, so I figure out what the problem is, and then there's a lot of resources out there, we just need to find the right people to ask where to get them, and somebody to actually do the work with the child. If you need help, Aryeh Gurewitz has a lot of resources for you. Let's say I don't see a problem, and I say, Baruch Hashem, thank you, everything is good. Is there anything I should be doing to help optimize my child's development academically? Or as long as there's no problems, I should leave things be and let the school do their thing?
Well, I always advocate for being proactive. Like I said, I honestly look at it, and I would encourage other parents to look at it, not because it's right or wrong, but just, again, because it's the most effective. Is I look at it like it's my responsibility to be mechanech my child, and the school is the main, almost like instrument that I'm using in order to do that. But essentially, I'm doing it. Not in a way that I'm taking credit. Of course, the Rebbes deserve all the credit in the world. But I'm saying in terms of responsibility, I'm looking at it as it's my responsibility. I'm choosing the school, which is the best school for me to fulfill my responsibility to be mechanech my child through the school. Okay, so that's one thing. Is that overall perspective, I think, will serve people really well. I heard Lawrence Kellerman, if you know who he is, Rabbi Lawrence Kellerman, he's a big rabbi, speaking about this recently. He said it in a very good way, which I can't do justice to, but basically he kind of said, the parents should take the perspective that, they say to the yeshiva, just do as little damage as possible. That's all I want from you. Minimize the damage, and I'm going to take care of the rest. And the yeshiva should say the same thing to the parents. Just don't damage the kid, and we'll take care of it. And if both sides are saying that, then you end up with two sides that are taking responsibility, and good things are going to happen from that.
Right. That's amazing.
But what else, more specifically than just the mindset? I mean, I would say...
mindsets are king. I'm very into mindsets.
Okay, good.
But what other practical tools would you have?
So I would say, I guess there's two parts to this conversation. One is if you have young kids and you're starting, from preschool age, which is really when I would say we should start thinking about this, from age 3.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is if you have a kid who is, behind and we're late in the game, but of course we don't want to give up just because we're late in the game. So it's really two different...
Let's start with the first step. When someone who does not have any issues, young children, what can they do to help their child optimize his school experience?
So I'll tell you like this. Every classroom teaches at a certain level, and you have a certain amount of kids that's just the right level for them. You have a certain amount of kids that are more advanced than that level, and a certain amount of kids that are below that level. Now, hopefully, the middle level that's being catered to well by the level that's being taught in the class is as big as possible. In Ocean Parkway, we use the number 80%. Like we want 80% to be, either at the level or above the level, and 20% we know we're going to proactively design interventions for them. As a parent, I really think that you can start to notice from when a kid is 3 years old and they're in preschool and they start learning the Aleph Beis, you can start to be able to tell if your kid is most likely going to be at the class level. Is he going to be the weaker kid in the class? Is he going to be the stronger kid in the class? I want to be careful with what I'm saying because I don't want to sound like I'm putting anyone in a box. I'm absolutely not. But it tends to be the case that, the kids that are strong when they're young, they stay strong throughout unless it's for some kind of emotional reason, and the kids who are weak, if there's no intervention, they're going to also be the ones that are weaker throughout, or they're the ones that are going to need those interventions throughout. Now, I don't want to take away from anyone's Yagaiti Matzasti or anyone's Kaichas Ne'elamim or anything like that, but B'derech HaTeva, simply, if no one gets involved, that's probably how it's going to happen. That's what I've seen. So you want to identify for each of your children, is my child going to be the genius of the class? Is he going to be the struggling kid in the class? Is he going to be in the middle? Is he going to be kind of like the 75th percentile or the 25th percentile? Like, where is he likely to be in the class? And based on that, you can think ahead. I mean, I know people are usually not comfortable thinking 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years ahead, but you can basically start planning. It happens to be in my case. I'll just share from my personal experience. I hope my kids will forgive me if they listen to this one day. But Baruch Hashem, I have 2 boys, and my older son, we could tell from early on he's going to be the kid that needs interventions. I don't know if I want to go into all the details right now. I don't know how much time we have, but basically we were very proactive in preschool about giving him a lot of opportunity to practice Aleph Beis and practice Kriya. And at first he was the youngest kid in the class, so we held him back here and made sure he'd be the oldest kid in the class. So developmentally, he'd be more set up for success. And now he's in pre-1A, and he's the most advanced reader in the class. Wow. If no one had done anything about that, and he just rolled into pre-1A with no opportunities given to him in the preschool age, and he just showed up in pre-1A and was expected to learn how to read in 1 year, like, I don't want to think about what would have happened.
Right.
I do this type of work, so we were very aware of the whole challenge and what could be done and so on. And then I have my other son is 3 years old, and I don't want any iron horror or anything, but Baruch Hashem, he's quite advanced. So I see I can start designing my older son. I'm trying to always teach him what they're going to learn next year, so that when he gets to next year, he kind of knows it already. And it's basically review. It'll be as smooth of a transition as possible. And with my son, who I see is going to be advanced, I'm going to do the exact opposite. I'm not going to teach him what they're doing, the next year. I'm going to have him learn some other thing on the side that he's excited about. At least this is what I think I'm going to do. I'm still planning it out. You know what I mean? But do you see the type of thinking that I'm talking about? It's like either he's going to be right there in the middle. The school's a perfect fit for him, and I just have to support him and make sure nothing goes wrong. But it will be more on autopilot, or he's going to be weak and I should plan interventions, or he's going to be strong and I should plan interventions.
Amazing. Okay, thank you so much. So basically, to sum it all up, we're from Aryeh Gurewitz, and he's explaining to us that a person always wants to be proactive with his son's children, I say, not necessarily sons. He happens to work in a boys' school, academic growth throughout their school years. And if they need intervention because they're a little bit behind the class, or if they need intervention because they are a little bit ahead of the class, it's important that the parent be on top of that, know what's going on, and try to work with the school and with anyone else that they need to help their children succeed as much as possible. It's definitely our hope that this will help many, many kinderlach to reach their utmost potential. Hashem. We're really out of time, but would you be able to share with us quickly the story of how you got into this in the first place? Would that be something you'd be able to share with us quickly, or it's too long?
I'll just tell you a very quick version. Basically, I'm a Baal Tshuva, and I became from when I was at Penn through a combination of the Meor Kiruv program there and the Chabad house. And I had a group of friends that we were becoming Baal Tshuva at the same time. And for us, like finishing college and going to yeshiva, that was like the dream, like going to yeshiva, Yeshiva was like the most exciting word in the dictionary. I don't know if it's in the dictionary, actually, probably not. But it was the most exciting word that we could think of, And there was a certain point when I transitioned to the mainstream yeshiva system after a little bit of time in Baal Tshuva yeshiva. And I saw that there are so many kids that, so many Bachrim that went through the yeshiva system and, didn't come out thriving, didn't come out loving Yiddishkeit, didn't come out, learning strongly and enjoying the learning. And, Baruch Hashem, there's plenty that are, obviously, but there's also too many that, in my opinion, that are not. And at that time, it really switched my focus from like, I'm going to learn Torah and then go back out into the world and make more Baal Tshuva, to I want to take the beautiful experience of Yiddishkeit that I have and give that to, from kids. They should get the Yerusha that is meant for them,
Wow.
So that's in a nutshell the story. And on the last day of Shana Rishona for me, which it's actually funny, it's this week coming up, Beis Nissen was the day that I was offered the job. Gimel Nissen is my anniversary, so Beis Nissen was the last day of Shana Rishona. That was the day that I was offered the job. And I was looking for like, what am I going to be able to contribute? I never thought I would work in an elementary school. Never in a million years was that ever part of my plan. And the opportunity was given to me. I learned from a great mentor.
An amazing story. Thank you so much, Aryeh. And we hope that this is a tremendous answer for everybody listening. And see you next time. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Parenting Not What You Thought podcast. I truly hope that this episode has been beneficial for you in your parenting. Please let me know either in the comments or by sending me an email at Baruch, that's BORUCH, at bmaparenting.com. Have a wonderful day.